Brought to you by Vets Business School, sculpting global leaders for 45 years and beyond.
Hello and a warm welcome to you this morning. We are live from Johannesburg. Now, the Brics Summit has come and gone, and it was hosted for the first time on African soil. This special broadcast seeks to answer those questions left after the dust has settled. What, if any, were the direct benefits from the continent from its membership of this super club of emerging economies, and how can these benefits translate into life-changing realities for Africa's people? I'm Godfrey Mutizwa, and we will attempt to find answers to that and more questions here on this special edition of its debate on the post-Brics 2013 summit measuring Africa's gains. But first of all, to lead us into this discussion, here's a quick synopsis of the Brics summit that was held in Durban.
It was the first BRICS summit on African soil. The world's biggest emerging economies converged on Durban for what many hoped would represent a new kind of global dominance for the often ignored nations of the South. Together, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa account for some 40% of global GDP. At least two of its members boast populations of 1 billion each. The rhetoric that came out of the BRICS summit in Durban had strong political undertones. A development bank has been tabled to rival the Bretton Woods institutions, a clear move for greater sovereignty for its member states. The BRICS group of countries have in their ranks some star players. China is by far the biggest investor on the continent and elsewhere. India is staking her claim as a country emerging from abject poverty. And of course, South Africa, the continent's leading economy. How does she shoulder the aspirations of a billion-strong continent? That is perhaps the biggest question to emerge from Durban. Can Africa benefit from BRICS? And can these emerging economies do more trade with each other that will bring real change to the lives of its people?
Joining me now in studio this morning are my guest, Lionel October, Director General, South Africa's Department of Trade and Industry, Namakabiso Machokweni, CEO of Business Unit South Africa, and of course, Dr. Martin Davis, Chief Executive Officer of Frontier Advisory Services. Gentlemen and lady, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm hoping you have come, sharpened your brains because early in the morning, and I have no doubt that all of you have been discussing, have been reading, have been talking to people, arguing with friends, family, colleagues about what the BRICS meant. So I did a little straw poll, if you like. I looked at a number of economists who were commenting on the BRICS from the big banks, and my straw poll returned all positive. Everybody saying the summit was a success, particularly the establishment of a development bank. But I want to get your views, and then I'll go into the detail of what I got out of those people. If I can start with you, Mr. October, because you were the host in part of this summit, and you, in part, had a big stake in terms of trying to ensure that there was a positive and substantive outcome out of the summit. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think on the whole, the event was a success, and I think for two main reasons. The one is we managed to establish some permanent institutions, or at least lay the basis for permanent mechanisms like the BRICS Bank and the Business Forum. But I think more particularly from the DTI perspective and from the economic perspective for the countries, that we achieved a range of commercial advantages. Firstly, a range of agreements was signed over that period with Russia, with India, with China on direct investments, FDI, into our economy. Yeah. So we've had investments in the cement industry, chemical industry, shipbuilding, ship repairs, in the agro-processing sector, the Dubai trade port, and then in the aerospace and defense industry between Denal and Russian helicopters and so on. So I think we've laid a firm foundation really at the investment level, and also shifted the debate from just quantitative trade, but really looking at investment within South Africa and within the continent.
Yeah. Now, some people, when they speak about what happened in Durban, speak of perhaps a history-changing event. Some people are equating it to a restructuring of the global order that was similar to what happened in 1945 with the establishment of the Bretton Woods institutions. So when you look at it yourself from a business perspective, you represent the broad breadth of South African business. Did you get that sense that the politicians actually did something right this time around, even though us in the media, when we start beginning seeing structures like secretariats, we begin to think, oh, bureaucracy again, here we go?
Well, Godfrey, thanks. For us as business, this was quite a historic move. It was the first BRICS summit where there was a launch of a business council in the full sense of the intention. Sure. So the Durban summit launched the BRICS Business Council, which is made up of 25 business representatives from the 5 BRICS nations. So this was quite a move for us. This is a call to business to basically get engaged in a strategic manner and be on the same table with our respective governments from the BRICS nations. Yeah. So we are really, we thought that was quite a strategic move that happened in Durban. So we think that we are all in the right direction. So we have now a business council that is chaired by Patrice Motsepe, yeah, who, because South Africa is chairing BRICS this year, yeah, is not only chair of South Africa Business Council, yeah, but is chair of the BRICS Business Council for the 5 nations.
Yeah. Now, Martin, I left you deliberately last because, of course, you think more than you talk. These need to put out policy positions, and you analyze it all and you try and make sense of it. Make sense for us, if you can, of the difference that this summit made and the difference that the various actions that were taken here made.
You know, if we put this in context, Godfrey, is the first BRICS summit was in 2009. It was a few short months after Lehman Brothers in September 2008. That's when BRICS moved from being an acronym merely as an indicator for future demand in the global economy, yeah, to become a geopolitical type institution. Now, 5 years later, we have a meeting in Durban last week, and as Lionel mentioned, it's becoming more institutionalized. There's more concrete outcomes rather than just a political talk shop, perhaps.
Is that necessary, and is that right?
You know, well, there's been comparisons, perhaps a little bit too ambitious, perhaps, as you alluded to, between the creation in the mid-40s of the Bretton Woods institutions, yeah, the likes of the IMFs, the World Banks, WTOs, etc., which really set sort of the governance structures for the global economy up until this day. There's an underlying sense, perhaps, that these institutions are somewhat obsolete and are not catering for the new emerging developing world. Yeah. And in many instances, they've yet to remedy the developmental challenges, particularly in regions like Asia, yeah, and certainly in Africa as well. Right. But in 1945, it was a very different world order. There was a sense of crisis, a sense of rebuilding, and the countries, largely the UK, Britain, the US, who created these institutions, were binded by common ideologies, that of market fundamentalism, market forces, and political liberalism, to try and find beyond a increased statist approach, perhaps, to our respective policies. I'm finding it difficult to understand how we align the ideologies, if there are any, of 5 countries to create globally representative institutions. Yeah,
which have lasted us for a long time, and some would argue are working extremely well, and therefore we don't need other institutions coming to play. But that's another discussion. I want to come back to you, Mr. October, and talk about the first, let me put it this way, some people think that was the most important development that came out of that summit, which is, of course, the agreement to establish the bank. The intention had been signaled, but now we had an agreement. But what we got from the statement from President Zuma, and this is the only thing that I took out, that it would be substantial and sufficient. There was no detail of the size of capital that this bank would have. There was speculation about its size. There was no indication of where this would be. There was no indication and timeline of when this would be done, which are, of course, things that are now, people are now beginning to talk about it. Where are we? How far are we from seeing this bank downtown Johannesburg?
Well, firstly, it was a significant decision that was made, because if you remember, it's only 12 months ago that the idea of a BRICS-led bank was raised. Sure. And if we're going to create a global development bank, with the size and catering for the African needs, catering for developing countries. For the past 12 months, the finance ministers have been tasked by the presidents to look at the financial viability of such an institution. So after the research, after the 12 months, they reported that definitely they've done their homework and so on. It is a viable idea, and so there was an agreement to establish the bank. That was established. Of course, if you're going to establish such a institution, as you know what it took to establish the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank and so on, it takes a number of years. So what they are now getting down to is the basics. What is the capital structure? What is the reach? What is the financing requirements and so on? Obviously, there are some ideas on the table, including where it will be hosted, including, and you know, I think our president has put down a good pitch for South Africa to be the host.
I laid the line, man, actually for you, because I said I want to see downtown Johannesburg.
So it will definitely be, it looks like that push has been made, and I think there's acceptance from many people. But as I said, the domicile is only one aspect. The key thing is to get the capital structure going, to see how it is going to be financed and how it's going to be structured. And so that work starts now. So I think it's a good thing that the finance minister has says, if we're going to create a permanent long-term institution, which is robust, you must get the basics right. So spend time on finalizing rather than just making quick, big announcements about the size and so on. Let's get the basics working and get a permanent institution established.
Is there a timeline?
Yes, I mean, as I said, they decided to work with urgency, and I think in the next 12 months, they'll probably finalize all the basic workings of it. Some of the thinking is quite advanced on some of the structures, but I think there will be really rigorous technical work now done on that.
The next 12 months, I'm putting it down, and I'll be knocking on your door in the next 12 months to find an update from you. Let's talk about the Business Council. Now, there was debate about the necessity for such an institution. For some people, when they look at the way the world has been structured, there hasn't been a formal, if you like, global business council. And here we are. Some people are saying business is getting into bed, if you like, with the politicians. Is that necessary? Is that appropriate? And will it work? And how will it work?
Well, the first thing that I would like to address, you said that we've had the summit. So the dust has settled. For the Business Council, this is where the work begins, actually. This is where
the dust is actually being created.
We're creating the dust. And hopefully it's good dust, because we are now at a point where we're looking at our work program in terms of what sectoral working groups are we going to form and what are we going to achieve, not only for the year that South Africa is a chair, but for more a long-term legacy with regards to Brics and business, particularly within Brics. So we think that it's a necessary structure. We've had structures like these in South Africa for bilateral relations and so on, but we think it's a unique opportunity where we have 5 nations and 5 nations that are poised to actually change the dynamics within the global economy that we are operating in as a business council. And we have an opportunity to influence and work with our respective governments in terms of, because whether you like it or not, there are issues that can only be negotiated by governments within, for instance, looking at trade facilitation, making sure that we deal with non-tariff barriers, you know, and so on. And these can really only be done by governments, and we need to give that input to government.
Forgive me for being simplistic, but I want to understand how it will actually work. Does it mean that the business councils are going to sit with governments and say, right, we want to build a railway line from Durban to Johannesburg. We want to pick company A and B or company X to do X of the work. How will it work practically, and how will you work with Indian companies that are coming here? Because we know a lot of these companies are already here. The Chinese are here, the Russians are here, the Indians are here.
Well, some of the skeptics, Godfrey, have said that there have been business dealings within the Brics community way before the establishment of the Brics Business Council. But what we're saying is that the establishment of the Brics Business Council will actually focus multilateral projects, investment projects, as Lionel has mentioned some of those.
So the big projects.
Big projects, but also this also gives us an opportunity in the Brics of formation, because we have countries such as Brazil and India that are renowned for their vibrant and dynamic small and medium enterprise sector. So this is one area that we are going to drive as the Brics Business Council, and women-owned businesses enterprises as well as youth-owned businesses.
Yeah.
So this offers us that opportunity as against, some other platforms that we've had in the past.
Yeah.
So we will have business-to-business engagement,
yeah.
but there are issues that need business-to-government engagement.
So business to government, business to business.
Yes.
But Nomaklabi, so I'm seeing a lot of dust here because we know that there are companies that from the Brics countries that are inside South Africa, inside Africa, and are going to compete for business with South African domiciled companies. How that conflict is held, we're going to write about. It's going to be a fun time for us journalists, but that's another day. Martin, let me come to you. When the announcement was made about the establishment of that 100 billion rand pool, $1 billion pool, the currency reserve arrangement, as they called it, one thought that came to my mind was the Liverpool song, "You'll Never Walk Alone." For a long time, the rand was alone, out there in the world, battling against the heavyweights, small open economy, free-floated currency that is buffeted. Every time there's a financial crisis, we know our rand will take a knock. Now, for the first time, you have a club with foreign exchange reserves in the region of $5 trillion. Have we found a powerful friend here, and the rand is no longer a one-way bet?
Well, I think it's quite a generalization of it. I think what the talk about pooling foreign exchange reserves, and as you say, the figure is largely driven by the Chinese, $3.3 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. A lot of it's held obviously in US debt. But
sure.
The interdependence of the sort of global financial system is obvious. I think it's far too premature, and perhaps what we're seeing here is almost financial nationalism. We've heard of resource nationalism, stock exchange nationalism. This is sort of financial nationalism too. I was, just to backtrack for a second, I spent mid-90s living in Asia.
Great.
And I never forget, in 1997, I was in Seoul when the Asian financial crisis hit, and it was financial meltdown. And the IMF at the time, people were holding up placards and protesting, and IMF stood for "I'm fired." And it was a similar sentiment, I think, in Southern Europe today.
Right.
And there was a sense what Southern Europe is feeling today, Asia felt most certainly back in the late 90s. So
and you're saying the IMF was the savior?
Well, the Asians would disagree. The Koreans and Malaysians, the country that recovered most rapidly post-1997 was Malaysia, which went entirely counter to IMF advice.
I remember they introduced
fixed to
controls.
repair, and sort of did everything's counter to the conventional, dare I say that, conventional financial market sort of ideology at the time, which permeates continuously now in the same debates happening. What I saw in Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, exactly the same debates today in Spain, in Portugal, in Cyprus, in Greece. So the intention around this, of a discussion around this pooling of foreign exchange reserves, was the end destination, as discussed. The ultimate institutionalization of this perhaps could be this creation of this alternative fund with perhaps different rules. But the question is how ambitious do we want to be, and how far can we push the rules of existing economics when it comes to macroeconomic management of developing world economies?
So what are you
saying? Those stabilization.
Are you saying it will not make a difference in the life of the rand?
No.
It will not?
No.
Let's hear from you, Mr. October. What was the government's intention in agreeing to this arrangement?
Well, as you know, I mean, even during the Bretton Woods period, the two institutions, or the two main ones they created, was the World Bank, which is more a development bank, and then the IMF was really to look at balance of payments problems.
And currencies.
That is why I think the real, it is really a reserve. As they have in Asia now, they've got what they call a Chiang Mai Initiative, which is a pool of reserves available to countries when they do run into a problem.
Right.
So similarly now
has it worked?
Absolutely, it has worked. Financial crisis hasn't returned to Asia. Asia is booming now. So they've got a stopgap. And if they ever hit a problem, Thailand or South Korea, there's a reserve for them to pull. Similarly, we have a reserve now. So it's an insurance policy that in case any of the countries hit a problem, there is this massive pool of reserves you can draw on to overcome short-term quantitative currency crisis. And I think that's the useful thing about it. So it's like really an insurance policy. Yeah.
Some people would say that how do you make it work? Because obviously this is not free money, and it will not be easily accessible, or will it?
Well, as I said, it's a reserve currency. It's not there for daily trade use.
Just feel free to come in if there's any particular point you
so
want
as I
to
said, it's really, as I said, it's not for daily use. That's the purpose. If you want funding to build a railway line, That's not the fund for that. That would be the Brics-led development bank. This is for if you run into a currency problem like they did in Asia in '96, as they run in Cyprus now.
Right.
So it's as I said, it's an insurance policy. It's a very, very useful tool to have in case you hit a problem. It's like being able to have a reserve account to draw on in case of a liquidity crisis.
So does that guarantee that there will be no more 13.85 against the dollar like we saw in 2001, the rand against the dollar?
Well, as I said, it doesn't deal with the day-to-day issues of currency
this was
management.
a crisis because then the perception amongst market participants was that the currency was a one-way bet. You know, you come in, the rand is going to fall, and the rand is going to fall. Every day we came in, we wrote stories about the currency down 1%, 1.5%, 2%, whatever it was.
Sure, I think that obviously the rand has been extremely volatile, but I think that's more a function of international markets and also our own management of the currencies.
Yeah.
But as I said, this is really in rare moments. Maybe we had it in early 2000, that slight run on the rand in that period. We haven't had it since. And so, but as I said, it's really a useful insurance policy to have.
Yeah, Martin?
I don't think, look, it's, correct.
You're not convinced?
Well, I think the initiative is great. So an African-style Chiang Mai Initiative is excellent.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and look, making it relevant to us in South Africa, we face no balance of payments crisis. We're not a mismanaged Southern European economy. We do not, like the Thailands or Koreas of this world in the late 90s, have short-term significant US dollar denominated debt with a plunging currency environment and massive 1,000% plus debt to equity ratios held by corporates in foreign US dollar loans.
Yeah.
So we're a well-managed economy. Will this affect the value of a rand? As Lyle mentioned, this is not a sort of a short-term sort of daily interventionist issue. The challenge we face in South Africa, well, not challenge, but reality, is that we're extremely highly traded currency, probably the highest in the world to GDP. So there's very, very little we can actually do other than seek to boost confidence in our economy over a long period.
Business would have been happy about this, wouldn't it? Because one of the big complaints from business is that it's not so much the depreciation or appreciation of the rand. It's the speed at which this happens. And that's what the government says it was trying to do here, to try and smooth out the fluctuations, not on a day-to-day basis, but in those times of extreme volatility. Was this a positive move, do you think?
It was, certainly, Godfrey, because as you've rightfully sort of summarized this, for business it's more the vulnerability of the rand, the fluctuation that bothers us. And this we see, in fact it's pretty normal for various formations to have such a cushion for when it's needed. One meeting that we had, we really characterized this as a formation of a cushion that is more ladders than snakes, if you've ever played snakes and ladders, because it basically cushions us for those bad times, and it doesn't take us down the snake route.
Yeah. I'm surprised by Martin, because I actually thought, because on the one hand now, of course, South Africa is not abandoning the traditional institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, for its extreme times of need. So you have got this one pillar, and now you've found another pillar, but they are very different pillars. The other will look at the numbers first before coming into play, and the other will look at it from an ideological perspective. A friend is under attack. This is me thinking now. I don't know if that's exactly what the governments were intending. And so I actually thought this is very positive for the rand. You do say we don't have funding problems, but to a degree we have. That current account deficit sitting at 6.5%, everybody has said this is a time bomb ticking here. We're going to see a rand blow out sometime in the future, because we are importing more than we're exporting.
Yes, I think, but I would argue we remain and maintain a very well managed fiscus in South Africa.
Yeah.
To compare us even down the line with our sizable current account deficit to a potential Southern European situation is just not going to happen. I think for me is that South Africa, as you allude to, reflects sort of the shift. We are aligned traditionally to Western, dare I say, or first world economies in Europe and North America. That shift is starting to take place towards sort of more the Eastern Hemisphere, represented by Brazil aside, the Brics largely. Our economic relations are shifting towards the Chinese, the Indians, and Southeast Asians increasingly. But how will that influence the sort of deeper ideologies or developmental thinking, that's already taking place. The sort of Main Street, Wall Street, and sort of JSE in South Africa, and sort of our business community.
Is it Maud Street?
Maud Street and Wall Street, same thing. So Maud Street is Maud Street is still very much inclined towards sort of a traditional world.
Sure.
I think Main Street's starting to shift, if I can say that. Maybe it's West Street. It's starting to shift towards sort of Asia. But from a government thinking, but Lionel, from the government thinking, it's exactly this: is how do we call it the developmental state? We've used that phrase largely in 2008, 2007. What does it mean? For me, developmental state means high growth, business enablement, and efficient management of public sector and parastatals. That's my definition.
Absolutely. After the break, Nomaxabiso, we would lose you from the desk. So before you go, your final thoughts, just in terms of your main takeaway points from the Brics Summit.
Well, we're glad that as business we are on the same table now with our respective governments. And that doesn't mean at all that we're going to just be, it's going to be an agenda of the various governments. The fact that governments saw it appropriate to invite business to the table means that they need business input, and that is exactly what we're going to be providing. And we are already, work is underway. We are going to be consulting with business largely, broadly within South Africa, but also within the Brics community to make sure that what is currently seen as just an opportunity becomes a reality in terms of business.
Some cynics would say that we're taking the Chinese model here where the state and business are inseparable, and we are inexorably moving into that environment where they are the dominant party and they with the established institutions are coming and imposing what is a very different system to what has traditionally happened here.
I'm not so sure about that, and I don't think it's a fact. I mean, we are equal partners with government in various, in our respective national economies, but also in a Brics environment. As I said when I opened, there is a need for a business-to-business direct relationship, and even with the Brics Brics Development Bank, there are certain projects, infrastructure, big projects at pre-feasibility and feasibility stage where the development bank will have quite an appetite for funding, but we will have commercial banks that will look at projects once they get into a commercial stage. And this is, business and sort of DFIs working together. And it can be done. It's pretty normal. We are not in any way saying there is a blurring of
the state and business role
of lines between what is private and what is public.
I can tell you certainly it's going to be an exciting time for us in the media because the stories are going to be fascinating. We're taking a quick break. Thank you for joining us. Please do stay with us for after the break because I intend to ask Mr. October where the government is going to find $5 billion for that currency arrangement reserve thing, and then secondly, the $10 billion for the development bank. I'm not seeing it anywhere. That's after the break.